Well, it's a pleasure to speak to so many friends and colleagues and allies. As some of you know, I have spent a good deal of time in Argentina. It is one of my favorite places. And I have participated both academically and politically in a number of movements there. There's also something else I want to say, and that is, in many, many nations that now are moving towards democracy and struggle over it, we must never forget how many lives were lost, how many people were jailed, and how long the process is that we can actually talk honestly about education, about social welfare, about women and their bodies, about class relations, and about indigeneity. These are crucial issues. So in some ways, my speaking to people here enables me once more to express my solidarity to the ongoing struggles that have gone on, and have these memories of giving a lecture at the Universidad de Buenos Aires. And I was in a room with all the pictures of students and faculty and workers who were disappeared. And that is still, every time I speak to people in Argentina, that memory comes immediately to my mind. So again, it is both a pleasure and in some ways some pain, knowing where we are and that we must talk about inequalities still. But we can begin with one last thing. And that is an apology. I do not speak Espanol. You've raised 4 questions that you would like me to respond to. It will be hard to keep these questions apart since they're all interrelated. And in my mind, there are 2 concepts that we need sort of as a pair of glasses that we need to use when we're beginning to think about these things. The first is what I call relational analysis. And that says that nothing can be understood in terms of the relations of inequality to things like education or any part of society, unless we connect them to the relations of dominance and subordination in the larger society and to struggles against those relations. Let me just give one example. There is an article of mine that has been translated very well by people at your university and published. When I walked into my office to begin making notes about that article, I walked up the stairs of the teacher education building. I walked into my office, I turned the light on and the light went on. And I turned on my computer and I began to type. We can say in a very positivist way that Michael Apple did a few simple things that were physical. I walked up the stairs, I opened my office door, I turned on the light, I turned on the computer, and the computer went on. That is not what happened, at least not when we think relationally. In my city, we burn coal or used gas, natural gas from fracking to produce that electricity. And whether I like it or not, the minute that light went on, and the minute my computer went on, I just had an anonymous but very real social relationship with the miners who dug the coal, with many people who suffer from the pollution that it creates, and to many children who will die or get badly ill from asthma because we do not use the sun for energy, as an example. So even simple things like my having a paper that I can distribute connects me, whether I like it or not, to exploitation and death. I wanted that vision, if you will, is what drives, I think, the claim about critical pedagogy, I would hope, about critical education, and about our understanding of these issues. The second concept is what I call repositioning. Whether I like it or not, I am a straight white man from the belly of the beast. And that requires me to put myself in a position of not being me as often as I can, of listening very carefully and being a student of women in control of their bodies, of gay and lesbian and questioning people who are in love with same-sex relations, with a politics of race and class, the politics of ability, etc. Okay? So I must reposition myself as often as I possibly can. I want to begin with that because I want to state those as fundamental epistemological and political and ethical points. And you can't answer these questions that you've asked me to think about unless we realize that you can't answer them, unless you take the position of those people who do not benefit from these relations and these positions. That I provide examples, that I'm not just talking to people who have read Discipline and Punish or volume 1 and 2 of Marx's Capital or the best feminist and anti-racist theory. If I can't put this in the daily life of people, then it is not critical pedagogy, okay? So that's a warning. There is some serious political work that has to get done, but I'm going to have some examples to try and make this clear. So the first beginning issue is the relationship between education and COVID and the pandemic and the rightist offensive. That is very complicated. First, we have to ask, what does education do? Who does it benefit? What does it teach and why? And secondly, we have to ask, what happened with COVID? We can criticize, we have to do what I call bearing witness to negativity. We have to tell the truth about what has happened. But in order to change this, we have to understand that sometimes the right tactically knows better what should be done than the left. So the right, the last of the true Gramscians, who believe that common sense is important, that people have elements of good sense and bad sense in their head, that they have contradictory sensibilities, that cultural struggles are absolutely central to social transformation, that the school is really, really important. While too much of the left says, no, it's all the economy, stupid. But part of that's true. The right has formed an alliance of its various differences. Neoliberals who believe that private is good and public is bad, and they have, it's been like a circus for them. They love this. Then there's neoconservatives, or really new conservatives, who believe we want a restoration of a national curriculum, and teachers should not have autonomy, and parents should decide what kids are taught. It's weird, a strong state, but parents with the big voice. What I call authoritarian populists. These are religious conservatives who say what's wrong with public schools is they're no longer godly. And there's one book, Protestant Bible, and they love homeschooling. And they also are now criticizing public schools around gender, around the teaching of anti-racist material. And then, oddly enough, and this is partly a criticism of the US, Argentina, Chile, and Brazil, a particular fraction of the middle class who have what I call symbolic capital. They believe in measurement. They believe that if it moves in classrooms, measure it. And if it doesn't move in classrooms, measure it anyway in case it moves tomorrow. That is, they want test scores as the ultimate story about what a good teacher is, what a good student is. And they would never vote for Bolsonaro. They would vote for Boric. They'd be horrified about what happened with Cristina. But they will vote for the right. And there's a lot of folks like that who are very, very worried about standards, about too much critical stuff. Will it enable my children to get to the Universidad de Buenos Aires? That's the only school I want my child to go to. Oh God. Oh God is the authoritarian puppet. So all of that now has come together. And they have formed an alliance that is pushing back. So one thing we must remember is we must learn from the right, how do you mobilize to change schools? Because they're very, very good. Now let me move on. Education is fundamentally social. It's not just my child in my home. It is the future of our society. And one of the dangers of the privatization of schooling is the dismissal of the social conscience in schools. Right? Schools are one of the places where, maybe the last place that kids can go, where there's a mix of classes in some school, where there's racial. So one of the things that, even to talk about curriculum, to talk about teaching, to talk about how do we evaluate, requires that we produce knowledge that comes from outside. So to talk about education is to talk about society, to talk about power relations, to talk about interrupting those power relations, and to talk to communities. That vision of who has knowledge and who's the teacher of the teachers is actually quite crucial. And that should be part of all teacher education programs. But it also means that we have to change what counts as important knowledge at universities. At the same time as we want to defend universities' right to do really powerful empirical and historical work, because that is under threat right now. So one state in the United States that has forbidden teachers to use any material on the history of race in the United States because it makes white children uncomfortable. And 21 states now, if I remember correctly, the number may be wrong, now have passed legislation that makes it illegal for teachers who talk about same-sex relations, who have literature on same-sex forms, have even any novels about that have the novels and biographies of indigenous people, that have material that's critical of the United States on its history of eugenics and its history of racial murders, that there'd be no economy in the United States except for the deaths of millions of Black people and the enslavement of them, right? So one of the states now has said, we want all of your syllabi for your courses at the university. All of them. It's really quite remarkable. So the attack then is on the very idea of any knowledge that is not linked to the economy. And you must dismiss any knowledge that makes people not neoliberals or neoconservatives or authoritarian populists. And that's what I mean about the brilliance of the right. They understand that some people may not care as much about whether the knowledge is about the economy, but they do care about the Bible. So let's link those two together. In Brazil right now, you can't understand Bolsonaro unless you understand at the same time that liberation theology has been pushed out and the theology of prosperity has been let in. Now that requires that we have to challenge what counts as knowledge for promotion, for instance, at universities. So in the United States, many what we call tenure committees. They are committees made up of administrators and sometimes other professors who read your material and then see what kind of journal it has been published in, and look at the world ranking of the journal. And is it an English language journal? Okay. Also, right now, for Rima, my wife and I were professors in China, just resigned, because of a variety of things, as you can imagine. But there, one of the reasons we were brought in as distinguished professors is that we would teach not students as much as faculty how to publish in world-class English language journals. One of the oldest printed languages in the world is Chinese. Why do we have to publish not in Espanol, not in Portuguese, not in Chinese, but only in Michael Apple's language? So I'm being a little too cute about this, but I mean this as to talk about critical education and the effects of COVID and the effects of the outside coming in. We are no longer in the privileged space of being immune to any of this. So increasingly, it is quantity, not quality, for promotion at universities. Increasingly, it is not narrative or historical research. It's how many things did you publish per year? Well, if you're writing a book of the history of labor education in Argentina, or the history of, in Brazil, of the landless movement. You've got similar movements in Argentina. That's a 5-year project. So when it comes out, you get rated as one publication. So you have to ask about the production of knowledge, the same questions I've been asking. What's its relationship to inequality? What counts as important knowledge? Who decides? Or teachers, people, for instance, who are doing research on critical classrooms. We're doing ethnographic research. It's not going in and just interviewing. You have to be present in those schools and classrooms for months. And for some people, the ethics mean that when you start writing, you must give it back to the teachers and have the response to it, and then rewrite. It's not just numbers. So we must then raise ethical questions about what is our response. And knowledge is, I don't want to say it's temporary, but it is in some way. So again, that production, and then I want to talk just a bit about circulation of it. Circulation is crucial. To whom are we writing? Now, I am lucky enough to be at a university that allows me to be seen as the reason for the distinguished professorship. I am able to write for teachers, for students, to remember that I was a union president and not to forget how to write like that. That means I'm not going to be quoting from Foucault, okay, or from theories of social reproduction. But I also publish in philosophy journals and in sociology journals, and I write a lot of books. Some of them are okay, some I'm sorry I wrote. they're all perfect. I've never been taught anything about making mistakes. Well, maybe, as my grandfather would say, 2 fingers, a lot of mistakes. Anyway, I'm being too cute again. So in many ways, what I see is part of it's a question of audience. Who owns the knowledge we produce? Who is it for? And that who has to be varied. So we are not amateur sociologists or amateur philosophers or amateur psychologists. We are psychologists or sociologists of something. In education, that's the hardest field to write about in the world because it's about everything. And what that means is that we have to be able to communicate powerfully in multiple ways. And that has to be seen as legitimate. So when we ask who has access, we have to say, to whom is this being sent? So we have to be able to write for some of the most complicated and academic work because it was a victory that we could do that. I'm first generation finishing secondary school in my family. I owe a debt to all the people who sacrificed to get me to have a doctorate, to be here, to have this conversation with you. My dream was to get a master's degree and then go back and be a union president and a teacher. And then I was changed and realized that I could do things that other people were not having the benefit of. And in order for me to do that, I'm still like that burning of coal. My work is to benefit a lot of people. That's what the aim is. And if it's just, that means it has to be for the best academic work, because too often people in education are seen as not really smart. Not as smart as folks in physics. And anyone can teach, sure. You really believe that? Come with me and spend a day in a body where serious teaching has to go on, and there's no money for the school. I want you to be there. Let's make it a week. If you survive, I can listen to your argument. Okay? And I'm smiling when I say this, but I think that's absolutely crucial. We have to use the concept I use is what is called non-reformist reforms. This comes from German social theorist Andre Gortz, a brilliant social theorist, who says, look, there are multiple sites that we have to interrupt, some of them in school, some of them not in school. Some of them about leadership, some of them about funding, some of them about curriculum, some of them about teachers' lives and having time to think. You can't do all of them. Some of them are simple reforms that can get washed away. Don't do those. Do those things, think of it as a series of doors. If you open that door, solve that practical problem, it opens another door. So in answering this, we have to say, what are my roles? And what's the answer? Tell the truth, always knowing that I have to answer the next question, make it a non-reformist reform. Who will get the benefit of this? What are the dangers? Okay? That's tough, because sometimes people are so afraid that the truth never gets out. So this requires, again, that I place myself, all of us place ourselves in a position to be criticized, but also I use the word not just secretary, but critical secretary. I also have to talk back. But if I'm going to talk back and say, no, we must do this, I have to then provide evidence that I will support them, no matter what the risks. Okay? But it's not an easy answer. It's the toughest question I think anyone who's critical faces. But then I also have to think I have to do research on spaces. That is, what are the spaces where you can interrupt, where it's possible? So capital loves privatization, doesn't like sociality. So that's, but all of us need this sort of conversations with others. We need to live in communities, right? You know, we don't want to be alone. That space can get filled by capital or ultra-conservative churches or ultra-conservative mosques that are sexist, and yeah. Or they can get filled by unions and syndicates. They can get filled by women's groups. Right? They can get filled by teachers forming alliances with each other. So part of our task is to look at spaces that are available and sort of saying, from the expertise that we bring, what are the spaces that we can deal with, that are spaces that can be occupied? Then we have to do research on the interruptions, make them public, so that people have hope. We can't do this if we stand on the balcony. So one thing we must not do is to say, we're going to stand up here and we're not affiliated. We're not part of this. We're neutral. That is a bad position to be. We're not neutral. We're being affected by this all the time. So when we're fighting not just for them, we're fighting for us. We also have to be mentors. You know, I said, you know, we have to show that it is possible to be outstanding researchers, outstanding ethical people about interruptions, but also we have to show that it's possible to do these things in ways that are doable. So for those of us at universities, and if we're teaching future teachers, we have to show what it means to be ethically committed. And then finally, many more of these, but this will be the last one. Finally, we have to just remember that this is what Raymond Williams, one of my favorite authors, calls the long revolution. None of this is easy, but we can't wait for other institutions to change. Even if we say that we have to change the economy first before we can change curriculum, teachers' lives, university. Excuse me, what's the economy? It's the unpaid and paid labor of real people. As I remember correctly, people work in schools and universities. Changing those places is changing the economy. So even if you're quite a mechanistic Marxist and think, yeah, what are you people? We don't care about schools yet. We don't care about questions of ability. We don't care about issues of gender or sexuality or race, class. Then the others will change later on. Okay, so you think that schools are not the economy? So we have to then remind ourselves that our work is absolutely crucial for social transformation. Okay? All right. You have been amazingly patient. It's been a pleasure in a couple of ways. First, for me to have the opportunity to speak to friends and colleagues in Argentina and elsewhere. And also to show my respect for the fact that people in Argentina and elsewhere are deeply involved in asking questions like this. it shows that you also are part of the interruption in which we must engage. And for that, I want to thank you from many people who are not where I live. So thanks very much. And just remember to keep strong. Ciao, ciao.